I am 86 years old now, and most mornings I wake up before the sun. Not because I want to, but because sleep doesn't hold on to old men very tightly. My back aches before my feet touch the floor, and the room is always quiet in a way that younger people rarely understand. Silence is different when you've lived long enough to see most of the people you love disappear one by one. My wife is gone. Most of my friends are gone. Even a few of the people I once argued with for years have already taken their last breath. And somewhere along the way, the version of me that used to worry about everyone's opinion simply faded away. When you get this old, you stop pretending. You stop performing. You start seeing life in a way that only distance and loss can teach you. I spend a lot of time sitting by the window in this small apartment. I used to live in a large house once, with 2 floors and a garage big enough for 3 cars. Now I have 1 room, a bed, a small table, and a chair that creaks whenever I lean back in it. On the wall is a photograph of my wife from the summer of 1974. She's standing by the lake, smiling at something outside the frame. I remember that day better than I remember what I had for dinner last night. Funny how memory works like that. The important things stay sharp. The rest fades like fog. When you reach the end of life's long road, something strange happens. You begin to see the whole journey at once. Not just the good days, not just the victories, but the patterns, the mistakes. The things people spend their lives chasing that don't actually matter when the lights begin to dim. And when you see it clearly, you feel a strange responsibility to turn around and shout back down the road to the people still running forward. Most of you believe you have time. I believed that too once. Time feels endless when you're young, stretching out like an open highway. You postpone things. You delay happiness. You promise yourself that someday you will slow down and start living properly. Someday you'll call that friend. Someday you'll take that trip. But the truth is something most people don't want to look directly at. Life does not warn you when it's about to change. Let me tell you about a man I once knew. His name was Harold. This was back in 1972, when I was still working long hours at a printing company downtown. Harold was the kind of man people admired. Tall, confident, always dressed perfectly. He had a sharp mind and the kind of ambition other men both respect and envy. Every Thursday evening we would meet at a small bar. Harold liked expensive whiskey and long conversations about the future. One night he told me he had everything planned out. He had it all mapped out like a careful blueprint. 5 more years of hard work, then Spain, learning to sail, taking painting lessons. He had it all mapped out. 3 mornings later, he collapsed on the sidewalk. Massive heart attack. 44 years old. Harold never took that trip to Spain. He never learned to paint. All those plans he carefully stacked in the future simply vanished in a single morning. A week later, I attended his funeral. His wife looked smaller somehow, like the world had suddenly become too heavy for her shoulders. People spoke about Harold's success, his intelligence, his achievements. They talked about his impressive career as if that somehow explained the tragedy. But standing there beside the casket, I realized something that would stay with me for the rest of my life. The real tragedy was not that Harold died. We all die. The tragedy was that Harold spent his entire life preparing to live later instead of living now. After the funeral, I helped clear out his office. His desk was exactly the way he left it. Papers stacked neatly. A calendar filled with meetings scheduled weeks into the future. Notes about deals he planned to close next month. It felt surreal, like opening a book where the final chapter had been ripped out. Within 2 weeks, the company had hired someone new to sit in his chair. Within a year, most of the clients had forgotten his name completely. The world kept moving forward, exactly as it always does. That was the day I realized something uncomfortable about life. The machine never stops. You might believe your work is irreplaceable. You might believe the world depends on your constant effort. But the truth is that every system replaces its missing parts faster than we expect. What remains are the moments you never lived. Years passed after Harold's death. I kept working, kept chasing promotions, kept telling myself I was doing the right thing. But the memory of that empty office desk stayed with me like a quiet warning I couldn't ignore. Because deep down, I knew something. I was becoming Harold. Every morning I woke up early, rushed through breakfast, and drove to the office while my children were still half asleep. Every evening I returned home tired, telling myself I was working hard for my family's future. I promised myself that when things slowed down, I would spend more time with them. When things slowed down. But life has a strange way of never slowing down. One night, my daughter asked me if I could come watch her school play the next afternoon. I remember the excitement in her voice, the way children believe their parents can fix everything simply by showing up. I told her I would try. That afternoon, I stayed late at the office finishing a project that suddenly felt urgent. By the time I got home, the house was quiet. My daughter was already asleep. On the kitchen table was a small program from the play with her name printed in bold letters. I sat there staring at it for a long time. Moments like that are the ones that follow you into old age. They echo louder than any applause you ever receive at work. Success fades quickly. Missed moments stay sharp forever. Now I sit here at 86 years old, watching the world outside my window move faster than ever. Young people rushing to jobs, staring at glowing screens, chasing goals they believe will finally make them feel complete. And sometimes I want to open the window and shout down to them, slow down, look around. You are living in the middle of the life you keep postponing, because one day you will wake up in a quiet room like this one. Your hands will shake slightly when you pour your coffee. The house will be filled with memories instead of people. And you will realize something that nobody tells you when you're young. The days you thought were ordinary were actually the most valuable things you ever had. The afternoon you skipped, the phone call you delayed, the hug you rushed through. Those were the real treasures. And the worst part is that by the time you finally understand their value, most of them are already gone. I spent most of my working life believing the same things many people believe today. I believed success was something you built piece by piece, like a brick wall that would eventually protect you from regret. I believed that if I worked harder than everyone else, if I sacrificed enough sleep and enough weekends and enough family dinners, eventually I would reach a point where life would open up and reward me for my patience. That belief is powerful. It keeps millions of people moving every morning. It convinces you that the exhaustion is temporary, that the sacrifices are necessary, that the reward is waiting somewhere ahead like a bright city at the end of a long road. But the strange thing about that road is that it keeps stretching. Every time you get closer to the destination, it quietly moves farther away. I remember the years after Harold died. For a while, his death shook me deeply. I promised myself I would change the way I lived. I told my wife that I wanted to spend more time at home. I told my children I would try to be around more. For a few weeks, I truly meant it. Then life resumed its normal rhythm. Work demands piled up again. New projects appeared. Promotions were discussed. And just like that, the urgency of everyday life slowly buried the lesson I thought I had learned. That's the danger of routine. It numbs you. It convinces you that everything is under control even when you're drifting in the wrong direction. A few years later, something happened that should have been one of the proudest moments of my career. I was working as the operations manager for a large printing company by then. After years of overtime, stress, and constant travel, the company held an annual ceremony to recognize employees who had contributed the most to the business. That year, they called my name. I still remember walking up to the stage in a dark suit while the room filled with applause. Someone handed me a crystal trophy engraved with my name and the words, Outstanding Leadership Award. For a moment, I felt 10 feet tall. It felt like proof that all those late nights had been worth something, that all the sacrifices had added up to recognition. I stood there holding that trophy while cameras flashed, and in that moment I believed I had finally reached the point where life would begin to slow down. But later that night, after the ceremony ended, I drove home alone. The house was dark when I walked inside. My wife had gone to bed hours earlier. My children were asleep in their rooms. I placed the trophy on the kitchen table and poured myself a glass of whiskey. I sat there in the quiet, staring at that shiny piece of glass while the excitement slowly drained away. Applause is a strange thing. It sounds powerful when it's happening, but it fades incredibly fast. Within minutes, the room had emptied. People had returned to their own lives. The celebration moved on to someone else. And there I was, sitting alone in a quiet kitchen, realizing something uncomfortable. The people at that ceremony didn't truly care about me. They cared about the results I produced. That's the difference between admiration and love. One disappears the moment you stop performing. I looked upstairs toward the hallway where my family was sleeping and felt a heavy weight settle in my chest. Because the people who truly loved me had been waiting for my time and attention for months while I chased the approval of strangers. I missed my son's baseball championship that year because of a business conference. I told him we would celebrate another time. Children accept those explanations easily when they're young, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes even though he tried to hide it. I missed my anniversary dinner with my wife once because a client suddenly wanted to finalize a contract. I told myself it was an important opportunity. My wife simply smiled and said she understood. But the quiet sadness in her expression stayed with me far longer than the contract ever did. You see, work has a clever way of convincing you that everything you're doing is urgent. There is always another email to answer, another meeting to attend, another deadline that feels critical in the moment. But when you reach the later chapters of life, you start to realize something uncomfortable. Most of those urgent things were never truly important. Years passed, and the company continued growing. Promotions came. My salary increased. We bought a bigger house and nicer furniture. I even purchased a car I had dreamed about for years, a sleek black sedan. At the time, it felt like progress. It felt like proof that I was winning the game everyone else was playing. But the strange thing about possessions is that their excitement fades quickly. That beautiful car eventually became just another vehicle stuck in traffic, The big house required constant repairs and bills. The expensive furniture became background objects I barely noticed anymore. One evening, I was sitting in my driveway staring at the house I had worked so hard to afford. The lawn was perfectly trimmed. The lights inside glowed warmly. From the outside, it looked like the picture of success, but something felt strangely hollow. Because inside that house, my children were growing up faster than I realized. My wife was carrying more of the family responsibilities than I ever admitted, and I was spending more hours at the office than I was inside the place I had sacrificed so much to build. Eventually, retirement came. The company threw a farewell party, gave a few speeches about my dedication, and handed me another plaque thanking me for decades of service. Then the next Monday arrived, and the office continued running without me. That's when the truth began settling in. Your career feels like the center of the universe while you're inside it. But once you step away, you realize it was only one small system moving forward on its own track. The office filled my chair with someone new within a month. The projects I once worried about were handled by other employees. The meetings continued. The deals continued. The machine kept moving exactly as it always had. And suddenly I had something I hadn't possessed in decades. Time. At first I didn't know what to do with it. I tried hobbies people recommended. I joined a local club. I started taking long walks through the neighborhood. But everywhere I went, I noticed the same quiet pattern. The things I had spent most of my life chasing had almost no meaning anymore. Awards collected dust in boxes. Expensive possessions slowly lost their importance. Business achievements that once felt monumental now seemed like distant stories from someone else's life. But the memories connected to people were different. Those stayed vivid. The sound of my daughter laughing when she was small. The quiet Sunday mornings when my wife and I drank coffee together before the children woke up. The few vacations we managed to take when I finally allowed myself to step away from work. Those moments still felt alive. Everything else had faded like old newspaper ink. And that realization was both beautiful and painful, because it showed me exactly where the real value in life had always been, and how often I had traded it away for things that no longer mattered. Old age has a strange way of stripping life down to its simplest truths. When you are young, the world feels complicated. There are endless voices telling you what success is supposed to look like. But when you live long enough, most of that noise fades away. The trophies disappear. The job titles lose their meaning. The expensive things you once chased become objects someone else will eventually throw away. What remains are the moments. Not the big dramatic ones you imagine, but the quiet ones that slip past you while you're busy chasing something else. A Sunday afternoon when the whole family sat together. The sound of your spouse laughing in the kitchen. The way your child grabbed your hand while crossing the street because they believed you could protect them. Those are the things that survive in your memory when everything else fades. After my wife passed away 10 years ago, the house became very quiet. Too quiet. At first I tried filling that silence with distractions. Television, radio, books. But silence has a way of winning eventually. You begin replaying your life like an old film. I replay the mornings when Eleanor and I drank coffee by the window while the neighborhood was waking up. I replay the time my son taught me how to use a fishing rod when he was 10. I replay the day my daughter called me just to say she loved me, for no reason at all. Those moments shine brighter than any accomplishment I ever received. And the painful truth is that there were far fewer of them than there should have been, because I believed a lie. The lie that life truly begins later. That once the career is secure, then we will start focusing on what matters. But life does not operate on that schedule. Time moves quietly and without negotiation. One year your children are small enough to ride on your shoulders. The next year they're packing their bags. The next year you're standing beside a hospital bed realizing there are questions you never bothered to ask. Life moves like that, and suddenly decades have passed. Now I sit here at 86 years old with hands that tremble slightly when I pour my morning coffee. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, but my mind is still clear enough to see one thing with absolute certainty. Most people are running in the wrong direction, chasing approval of people who will forget their names. Meanwhile, the things that truly matter are quietly waiting in the background. A conversation with someone you love, a walk outside while the sun is still warm on your face, a moment of forgiveness that frees both people involved. Those are the real victories. The older I get, the more I realize that life is not about accumulation. It's about attention. What you choose to notice. What you choose to give your time to. Because time is the only currency you truly possess. And once you spend it, there is no earning it back. Young people often ask what advice an old man would give if he could start life again. The answer is surprisingly simple. First, stop worrying so much about what other people think. I wasted years hesitating, doubting myself, trying to avoid embarrassment or criticism. But the truth is that most people are far too busy worrying about their own lives to spend much time judging yours. The fear that keeps you from trying something new, from expressing how you feel, from stepping into opportunities, That fear is mostly an illusion created inside your own mind. Take the chance. Say the words, try the thing that scares you. The embarrassment you fear will disappear quickly, but the regret of never trying can stay with you for decades. Second, treat ordinary moments as if they might be the last time they happen, not in a dark or frightening way, but in a grateful way. One day you will hug someone you love for the final time and you won't even realize it in that moment. One day you will hear a familiar voice for the last time. One day you will walk through a place that holds memories and it will be the last time your feet touch that ground. If you remember that, even occasionally, you will begin appreciating the present in a way most people never do. The coffee will taste better, the conversations will last longer, the small moments will feel bigger, and finally, wake up to the life you already have. I watch people today walking down the street staring into small, glowing screens as if the real world is happening somewhere else. They scroll endlessly through other people's lives while ignoring the one unfolding directly in front of them. Youth is a powerful gift, but many people spend it distracted, numbing themselves with noise and information. Look up, feel the wind on your face, call someone you love just to hear their voice. Forgive someone you've been holding anger toward for years. Not because they deserve it, but because carrying that anger wastes the little time you have. The clock is always moving, whether you acknowledge it or not. Every day that passes is a day that will never return. That isn't meant to frighten you, it's meant to wake you up. Because once you truly understand that time is limited, you start living differently. You stop postponing joy. You stop waiting for perfect conditions that never arrive. You begin living now. I am an old man sitting in a quiet room, looking back across 86 years of mistakes, victories, regrets, and moments of unexpected beauty. I cannot go back and change the choices I made. I cannot reclaim the time I spent chasing things that no longer matter. But you can still choose differently. You are still standing in the middle of your life, so don't spend it waiting. Eat the good meal. Take the trip you keep postponing. Tell people you love them before the moment passes. Sit beside someone you care about and listen without looking at the clock. Because one day, much sooner than you think, you will also be sitting quietly somewhere looking back across your own life. And the question that will matter most is very simple. Did you actually live it? Or did you spend all your time preparing to start later? I'm tired now. That happens when you reach this age. But before I close my eyes tonight, I hope one thing sticks with you. Your life is already happening. Don't miss it.